pain was the only language Elara's song had left. It lived in the frayed satin of her point shoes, in the bruised crescents of her toenails, and in the screaming muscles of her calves as she held the arabesque. The Grand Theatre was crumbling, literally and metaphorically. Dust motes danced in the single, harsh spotlight, swirling like ghosts of the audience that used to fill these velvet seats. Tonight, there was no audience. Just the empty, gaping maw of the dark auditorium. And him. Elara could not see him, but she felt him. A sensation like a razor drawn slowly down her spine. The air in the theater had shifted 20 minutes ago, thickening, growing heavy and charged with ozone, as if a storm had moved indoors. Someone was watching from the royal box. The shadows there were too dense, too absolute. She lowered her leg, her breath hitching in a throat that had not produced a sound in 3 years. Focus, she commanded herself. The silence was her fortress. If she did not speak, she did not exist. If she did not exist, he, the monster from her past, could not find her. Again, the director's voice cracked from the wings. Mr. Bay sounded tired, defeated. He knew, just as Elara knew, that the creditors were coming at dawn. The Grand Theatre, her sanctuary, her hiding place, was dead. Elara reset. Fourth position. Prepare. The heavy oak doors at the back of the auditorium groaned open. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Mr. Bay stopped the music. Elara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird desperate to break the cage of her chest. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Expensive. The click of hard leather on the worn parquet floor echoed with terrifying precision. A man emerged from the gloom of the aisle. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that absorbed the dim light rather than reflecting it. He did not look like a creditor. Creditors were messy, angry, loud. This man was a void. He moved with a predatory grace that made the hair on Elara's arm stand up. Mr. Bay, the man said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth as velvet wrapping a knife. You are finished here. Mr. Bay stumbled out from the wings, wringing his hands. Sir? We are in rehearsals. The bank said we had until Friday. The bank sold your debt an hour ago, the stranger said. He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up. He was not looking at Mr. Bay. His eyes, obsidian and terrifyingly intelligent, were locked on Elara. To me. Elara instinctively stepped back, the rosin on her shoes crunching softly. She wanted to run, but her legs, usually so powerful, felt like water. Do not look at him, her survival instinct screamed. Be invisible. Who are you? Mr. Bay stammered. I am the man who owns the floor you stand on, he replied, finally climbing the stairs to the stage. He moved effortlessly, invading her space, consuming the oxygen. He stopped 3 feet from Elara. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and a mouth set in a line of cruel indifference. But it was the eyes, cold, calculating, possessing, that froze her blood. Leave us, the man commanded, not breaking eye contact with Elara. But, leave. Or the debt extends to your family's personal assets. Mr. Bay fled. The sound of the stage door slamming shut vibrated through the floorboards, traveling up through Elara's feet and settling in the pit of her stomach. She was alone. With a predator. The man circled her. He walked slowly, inspecting her like she was a statue in a museum or a horse at an auction. Elara kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her chest heaving. She could smell him, sandalwood, rain, and the metallic tang of something dangerous. They call you the Silent Swan, he said softly, coming to a stop behind her. His breath ghosted over the sensitive skin of her neck, sending a violent shiver through her. Elara song. No past. No family. You simply appeared in Seoul 3 years ago, mute and desperate. Elara's hands curled into fists at her sides, her nails biting into her palms until she felt the sting of skin breaking. How does he know? Look at me. It was not a request. It was an order woven with absolute authority. Slowly, agonizingly, Elara lifted her head. She met his gaze. My name is Cashin Ree, he said. And I have not bought this theater for the real estate. He reached out. Elara flinched, bracing for a blow. Instead, his fingers, warm and rough, brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. The touch was shocking, electric. It burned a path straight to her core, igniting a confusing mix of terror and heat. I bought it for the inventory, Cashin whispered. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, tilting her face up. You. Elara opened her mouth to scream, but only a ragged gasp escaped. The silence, her old enemy, her old friend, choked her. The phantom sensation of hands around her throat, a memory from 3 years ago, flooded her senses. The room spun. You see a not speak, Cashin noted, his eyes narrowing analytically. Psychogenic aphonia. The doctor said it was trauma. I say it's cowardice. The insult snapped her back to reality. Anger, hot and bright, flared in her chest. She slapped his hand away. The sound echoed in the empty theater. Cashin did not look angry. He looked amused. A dark smirk played on his lips. Fire, he murmured. Good. I detest broken things that do not fight back. He took a step closer, crowding her, forcing her to retreat until her back hit the rough brick of the proscenium arch. Trapped. Here is the reality, little swan, Cashin said, placing a hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. Mr. Bay forged his financial records. He is going to prison. This building will be condemned by morning. You have no job, no home, and judging by the fake ID you used to get this contract, no legal standing in this country. Elara's heart stopped. He knows everything. And, Cashin leaned in, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, I know who you are running from. I know who gave you that scar on your shoulder. Elara stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to his dark eyes. The men from her past. The reason for her silence. The reason she slept with a chair wedge under her doorknob. He is in Seoul, Elara, Cashin dropped the bomb. He tracked you down. He landed at Incheon 4 hours ago. Panic, white hot and blinding, exploded in her brain. She pushed against Cashin's chest, needing to run, needing to hide. But he was a wall of muscle, unmoving. He caught her wrists, pinning them against the brick wall with one hand. His grip was iron, inescapable. Running will not save you this time, he hissed, his face inches from hers. He will find you. He will finish what he started. Unless. Elara stared at him, eyes wide with tears she refused to shed. Unless what? Unless you belong to someone else. Someone he fears. Cashin released her wrists, but did not step back. Me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a contract. It was thick, bound in black folder. He held it up. I am offering you a position. Private dancer. Exclusive to my estate. You live in my house. You dance only when I say. You do not leave without my permission. In exchange, I clear your debts. I legalize your status. His eyes darkened. And I kill anyone who tries to touch you. It was a deal with the devil. A golden cage in exchange for a life. But if the man from her past was here, she was already dead. Elara looked at the contract, then at Cashin. His expression was unreadable, a mask of aristocratic indifference, but his pulse was visible in his neck, beating a steady, heavy rhythm. He was not indifferent. He was hungry. She made a signing motion with her hand. Pen. Cashin produced a heavy fountain pen. Smart girl. Elara signed. Her hand shook, the signature looking like a seismograph of her fear. As the ink dried, she felt the invisible shackles snap into place. Pack nothing, Cashin said, taking the folder. Your old life is dust. Everything you need is waiting. He offered her his hand. It was a test. A command. Elara hesitated, looking at the large, calloused palm. If she took it, she was admitting she was his. She looked at the dark exit of the theater, imagining the men from her past waiting in the shadows. Then she looked at Cashin. A monster she knew versus a monster she did not. She placed her cold hand in his. Cassion's fingers closed around hers, possessing, claiming. Come. The drive was a blur of neon lights and rain streaking against the tinted windows of the Maybach. Elara sat as far from Cassion as the leather seat allowed, her knees pulled to her chest. He ignored her, tapping on a tablet, speaking in rapid, hushed Russian into a phone. Russian. The language of snow and blood. Her past. She realized then that Cassion was not just a Korean businessman. He was something hybrid, something far more dangerous. The car ascended. They were driving up into the hills of Hanam-dong, where the air was cleaner and the secrets were more expensive. They passed gates guarded by men with earpieces and bulges under their jackets. Finally, they arrived at a fortress of glass and steel perched on the edge of a cliff. The Eyrie, Cassion announced as the car doors were opened by servants who bowed low, refusing to look him in the eye. He led her inside. The house was magnificent and cold. Marble floors that looked like ice, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling city of Seoul, and art, grotesque, beautiful, priceless art, on every wall. It did not feel like a home. It felt like a gallery for stolen things. Your wing is the East Corridor, Cassion gestured. You have a studio there. A bedroom. A terrace. You do not enter the West Wing. Ever. Elara nodded, hugging her arms around herself. She was still in her leotard and wrapped skirt, shivering. And Elara, he stopped at the base of a floating staircase. He turned to her, and the intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. I expect a performance. Tonight. Her eyes widened. Now. She was exhausted, terrified. I paid a high price for you, Cassion said, his voice dropping to that dangerous purr. I want to see if you are worth it. He led her to a massive room with hardwood floors and a wall of mirrors. A single grand piano sat in the corner. He sat on a leather bench, crossing his legs, and gestured to the center of the floor. Dance. There was no music. Only the sound of the rain hammering against the glass. Elara stepped onto the floor. Her body ached. Her mind was screaming. But when she assumed the opening position, something settled. This was the only place she had control. She began to move. She danced the pain. She danced the fear of the last 3 years. She spun until the room blurred, until Cassion was just a dark shadow in the mirror. She threw herself into a grand jeté, landing with a soft thud, transitioning instantly into a frantic, pleading contemporary sequence. She was telling him her story, screaming without a voice, begging him to see her, not just own her. When she finished, she was gasping, sweat slicking her skin, her chest heaving. She collapsed to the floor in a heap of exhausted limbs. Silence stretched. Heavy. Suffocating. Then, slow applause. Clap. 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 Elara looked up. Cassion was standing over her. He looked wrecked. The mask of indifference had slipped, revealing a raw, jagged hunger that terrified her more than his coldness. Exquisite, he whispered. He reached down and hauled her to her feet, his grip bruising. He did not let go. He pulled her flush against his suit, ignoring the sweat, ignoring the dirt from the theater floor. You are not a swan, Elara, he murmured into her hair, inhaling her scent. You are a phoenix. And I am going to burn the world down just to watch you rise. Suddenly, the intercom on the wall buzzed. A harsh, grating sound. Sir, a voice crackled. Security alert at the main gate. An intruder. He says he's here for the girl. Elara's blood turned to ice. She went rigid in Cassion's arms. He's here. The man from her past. He had found her already. Cassion did not flinch. He did not look surprised. He just tightened his hold on her, one arm banding around her waist like a steel bar. Identify, Cassion commanded the air. Dmitry Volkov, the security chief replied. Elara let out a strangled whimper. The name ripped through her like a bullet. Dmitry. The man who had broken her voice. Cassion looked down at her. He saw the sheer terror in her eyes, the way her pupils dilated until there was no iris left. He did not offer comfort. He offered violence. Kill the lights, Cashin ordered the security chief. Release the dogs. And tell the sniper on the roof he has permission to engage. He dragged Elara toward the window. Down below, at the massive iron gates, headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV was ramming the gate. Watch, Cashin whispered against her ear, his lips brushing the shell of it. Watch what I do to men who try to touch my property. Elara shook her head, trying to pull away, but he held her fast. He forced her to look. You wanted safety, Elara. Cashin's voice was dark, twisted, possessive. Safety is a myth. There is only power. And now, you are under mine. Down below, a gunshot cracked through the night. A figure fell. Cashin turned her around, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were wild, dilated, high on the violence. You are mine now, he vowed, his hands framing her face, thumbs pressing into her cheeks hard enough to leave marks. Body. Soul. Silence. If you try to leave this house, I will hunt you. If you try to run, I will chain you. You are the porcelain doll in my collection, and I never, ever break my toys. He leaned in, his mouth hovering millimeters from hers. She could taste the expensive scotch on his breath, mixed with the adrenaline of the kill. Welcome home, Elara. He walked to the heavy double doors of the studio, pushed her gently inside, and closed them. Click. The sound of the lock turning from the outside echoed like a tomb sealing shut. Elara's song slid down the door to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. Outside, the rain washed away the blood. Inside, the golden cage had just snapped shut. The lock clicked. The sound was small, mechanical, and final, yet it echoed in the vast silence of the studio like a guillotine blade dropping. Elara did not move. She sat curled against the door, her cheek pressed to the cold wood, listening. Outside, the chaos had evolved. The gunfire had ceased, replaced by the low, urgent murmur of voices and the dragging of heavy objects. Then, silence. Not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, pressurized silence of a predator digesting a meal. Elara's shoulder throbbed, the old scar tissue reacting to the stress, a phantom reminder of the knife Dmitri had used to carve his ownership into her skin 3 years ago. He found me. The thought was a jagged shard of glass in her mind. But he did not get in. Hours bled into one another. The rain outside turned into a relentless drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elara dozed fitfully, waking with a start every time the wind howled. Then, the handle turned. Elara scrambled back, pressing her spine against the mirrored wall, her breath trapped in her lungs. Cashin entered. He had changed. The charcoal suit was gone, replaced by black lounge pants and a fitted black cashmere sweater that did nothing to hide the width of his shoulders. He looked deceptively soft, domestic even, until you looked at his hands. His knuckles were split. Raw. Red. And there was a smear of blood, dark, drying, on his jawline that he had not bothered to wash away. He did not look at her immediately. He walked to the center of the room, to the spot where she had danced, and stared at the scuff marks her point shoes had left on the floor. He is gone, Cashin said. His voice was devoid of inflection. For now. Elara watched him, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She signed, her hands trembling, dead. Cashin finally turned his gaze to her. The intensity of it hit her like a physical blow. Disappointed. She shook her head violently. He had a team. Cashin moved toward her, his movements fluid, stalking. 6 men. Highly trained. Mercenaries from St. Petersburg. He stopped a foot away, looming over her. They are all dead. Dmitri, unfortunately, has the instincts of a cockroach. He survived the sniper fire and fled. Elara squeezed her eyes shut. He is alive. Open your eyes. The command was soft, but it carried the weight of iron. Elara obeyed. Cashin crouched down so they were eye level. He smelled of soap, expensive tobacco, and the metallic tang of violence. You are shaking. He reached out, taking her cold hands in his battered ones. The contrast was jarring, her pale, delicate fingers against his bruised, dangerous knuckles. You think I failed, he stated, not asking. You think because he breathes, you are unsafe. Elara pulled her hands away, signing rapidly, angry tears pricking her eyes. He will come back. He always comes back. You do not know him. Cashin laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. I do not know him. Elara, I knew Dmitry Volkov when he was stealing car radios in Vladivostok. I know how he thinks. I know how he hunts. He leaned in, his dark eyes boring into hers. And I know he is terrified of me. Cashin stood up, extending a hand. Come. You need to eat. You are too thin. A bird made of hollow bones. Elara stared at his hand. The hand that had likely killed men tonight. The hand that offered her food. The cognitive dissonance made her dizzy. But hunger was a primal force, and she had not eaten since yesterday's apple. She took his hand. Life at the Eyrie settled into a disturbingly opulent rhythm. It was a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. Elara had no phone. No internet access. The TVs played only pre-selected films, mostly old classics, ballets, silent movies. It was as if Cashin was curating a reality where the outside world, and its threats, did not exist. Her days were regimented. 8 o'clock. Breakfast on the terrace. Cashin was rarely there, having left for business that Elara assumed involved leverage and intimidation. She ate alone, served by a silent housekeeper named Mrs. Park, who looked at Elara with a mixture of pity and fear. 10 o'clock. Training. Cashin had outfitted the studio with everything she needed. New point shoes, dozens of pairs, custom-made from Freed of London. Therabands. Rosin. A bar made of polished ash wood. Elara danced because it was the only way to scream. She punished her body, pushing through the exhaustion, trying to exorcise the fear that lived in her marrow. 1900 hours. Dinner. This was mandatory. This was the torture. Cashin would return, looking impeccable and dangerous, shedding the violence of his day at the door. He demanded she sit with him at the long mahogany table. The food was exquisite, Michelin star quality, but Elara could barely taste it under the weight of his gaze. He watched her eat. He watched her drink. He watched her the way a wolf watches a deer, waiting for a sign of weakness. The adagio you practiced today, Cashin said one evening, cutting into a rare steak. The knife sliced through the meat with surgical ease. Your extension was lazy. Elara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. She glared at him. Lazy. You are favoring your left ankle, he continued, taking a sip of red wine. You do not trust it. Elara set her fork down with a clatter. She signed, I am not a machine. You are an instrument, Cashin corrected, his eyes dark. And I have invested heavily in your maintenance. If you break, it reflects poorly on me. Is that all I am? She signed, her movements sharp with anger. An investment. A doll. Cashin paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, the mask slipped. A doll implies you are plastic, Elara. Plastic is cheap. You are porcelain. Rare. Beautiful. And yes, fragile. I am not fragile, she mouthed, no sound coming out. Then prove it, he challenged. Stop cowering in your room when I am not here. Stop checking the locks 3 times a night. If you want to be treated like a partner, stop acting like a victim. Elara stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She threw her napkin onto the table. Cashin did not flinch. He just watched her storm out, a faint, satisfied smirk touching his lips. He wanted her fire. He was goading the phoenix to rise from the ashes of the victim. 2 weeks later, the storm broke. It was a typhoon, lashing against the glass walls of the Eyrie, turning the world outside into a gray, churning chaotic void. The power flickered, the backup generators humming to life with a low vibration that Elara could feel in her teeth. She was in the library, a massive 2-story room filled with books she was not allowed to read. Cashin was home early. He was in his study, the West Wing. The West Wing. The Forbidden Zone. You do not enter the West Wing. Ever. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but boredom and fear are worse. Elara had noticed that Mrs. Park had left the service door to the west corridor slightly ajar when she brought Cashin his coffee. Elara stood in the hallway, looking at that sliver of darkness. The thunder crashed overhead, masking the sound of her footsteps. She should not. If he caught her. She remembered his words. Stop acting like a victim. Victims followed rules. Survivors broke them. Elara slipped through the door. The air in the West Wing was cooler. The decor was sparser, more brutalist. Concrete walls. Minimal furniture. It felt less like a home and more like a bunker. She passed open doors, a gym that looked like a torture chamber, a server room humming with blue lights. At the end of the hall was the double door to his private office. It was cracked open. Elara crept closer, her breath shallow. She peered inside. The room was dominated by a wall of screens. Security feeds. Not just of the perimeter, but of the house. The kitchen. The library. The studio. And her bedroom. Elara's blood turned to ice. He was watching her sleep. He was watching her dress. But that was not the worst part. On the adjacent wall, pinned directly into the expensive soundproofing, was a collage of photographs. They were not digital prints. They were grainy, surveillance-style shots. Elara stepped into the room, drawn by a horrifying magnetism. Photo 1, Elara in a park in St. Petersburg, 4 years ago. She was laughing, eating ice cream. Before the silence. Photo 2, Elara leaving the theater in Moscow. Dmitri was in the background, his hand on her neck. Photo 3, Elara at the airport, wearing oversized sunglasses, fleeing to Seoul. Photo 4, Elara working at the convenience store in Seoul, her first month there. He had not just found her when he bought the theater debt. He had been watching her for years. Beautiful, is not it? The voice came from the shadows of the corner chair. Elara gasped, spinning around. Cashin sat there, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, watching her. He did not look angry. He looked resigned. How long, she mouthed, backing away until she hit the desk. Since the Bolshoi, Cashin said, standing up. He moved into the light. I was there the night you danced, Giselle. The night Dmitri broke your collarbone backstage. Elara's hand flew to her collarbone, the memory of the snap echoing in her bones. I wanted to kill him then, Cashin admitted, his voice low, vibrating with suppressed rage. But I was constrained. Business agreements. Politics. He walked toward her, and this time, Elara did not back away. She was too stunned. I watched you fall apart, he continued. I watched you run. I watched you hide in this city, starving yourself, dimming your light so no one would see you. He stopped in front of her, slamming his hand onto the desk beside her hip, trapping her. I waited, Elara. I waited for you to come to me. I waited for you to ask for help. Why did not you help me? She signed, her fingers frantic. Because you needed to save yourself first, Cashin growled. If I had stepped in, you would have just traded one master for another. You would have been grateful, yes. But you would have been weak. And now, she gestured to the room, the screens, the cage. Now, Cashin's eyes burned with a terrifying intensity. Now Dmitri is here. And I am done waiting. He reached out, his fingers grazing the scar on her shoulder through her silk blouse. You think this is obsession? It is. You are the only thing in this world that makes me feel something other than cold indifference. You re-crazy, she mouthed. Functionally, yes. He leaned in, his lips inches from hers. The tension was suffocating. It was not romantic, it was volatile. A match held to gasoline. Get out of my office, Elara, he whispered. Before I forget that I promised not to touch you until you asked. Elara fled. She ran back to the East Wing, her heart pounding not with fear, but with something darker. Adrenaline. Complicity. He was a monster. But he was a monster who worshipped her. The attack happened 3 days later. It was not a frontal assault. Dimitri was too smart for that now. It was subtle. Insidious. Elara was in the studio, stretching. Mrs. Park entered with a tray. Tea. A protein bar. For you, miss, the older woman said. Her voice sounded strained. Elara nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. She sat on the bench and reached for the tea. The ceramic cup was warm. She lifted it to her lips. Smell. Almonds. Bitter, chemical almonds. Elara froze. Her grandmother had taught her about herbs, about poisons. Cyanide. She looked up at Mrs. Park. The woman was trembling, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Mrs. Park whispered, sobbing. They have my son. They said if I did not. The door to the studio burst open. Cashin did not walk, he blurred. He covered the distance in a heartbeat. He did not look at Mrs. Park. He looked at the cup in Elara's hand. He slapped it away. The porcelain shattered against the mirrored wall, the tea splashing like brown blood. Do not touch it, he roared. Mrs. Park collapsed to her knees, wailing. My son, they have my son. Cashin stood over the weeping woman. His face was a mask of death. He pulled a gun from the holster at the small of his back, a sleek, matte black Sig Sauer. Elara scrambled up, throwing herself between Cashin and the housekeeper. She grabbed his arm. The muscle was rock hard, vibrating with the intent to kill. No. She signed, her eyes pleading. She was forced. She tried to kill you, Cashin snarled, his eyes black pits. Loyalty is binary, Elara. It is 1 or 0. She is a 0. They have her son. Elara pushed against his chest. You would do the same. You would burn the world, remember. Cashin looked down at her. His chest heaved. The gun remained leveled at the sobbing woman behind Elara. She compromised your safety, he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. That is a death sentence. Please, Elara mouthed. It was the first time she had pleaded with him. Do not be him. Do not be Dimitri. The name struck him. Cashin's jaw worked. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered the weapon. He looked at Mrs. Park. Get out. If I see you in Seoul by sunset, I will execute you myself. Go find your son. My men will track him. Mrs. Park fled, scrambling on the floor before running out the door. Cashin turned to Elara. The adrenaline was crashing off him in waves. He holstered the gun and ran a hand through his hair, destroying the perfect style. He looked human for a moment. Terrified. He got inside, Cashin whispered. I fortified the walls. I bought the guards. And he got inside through a teacup. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I cannot protect you. It was the all is lost admission. The great Cashin Ri, the wolf of Hanam Dong, was admitting defeat. Elara watched him. She saw the cracks in the armor. She saw the boy who had watched her dance Giselle and fallen in love with a ghost. She did not think. She moved. She stepped forward and took his face in her hands. His skin was burning hot. He went still, his eyes widening in shock. Elara pulled him down. She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. A claiming. It tasted of fear and almonds and tea. She poured all her silence, all her rage, all her confused gratitude into it. Cashin hesitated for a microsecond, and then he broke. He groaned, a low animal sound in his throat, and his arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet. He crushed her to him, burying his face in her neck, inhaling her, grounding himself. Elara, he gasped against her skin. You have no idea what you just started. I know, she thought. I am lighting the match. Suddenly, the lights in the studio went out. The emergency red strobes did not trigger. Just total, absolute darkness. Cashin went rigid. He dropped Elara, shoving her behind him. Stay down, he commanded. The glass wall of the studio, the bulletproof, storm-proof glass overlooking the cliff, cracked. A single spiderweb fracture appeared in the center. Then another. Sniper. High caliber. Run. Cashin shouted, grabbing her hand. The glass shattered. Wind and rain exploded into the room, bringing the storm inside. And with the storm came shadows. Men rappelling down from the roof. Dmitri was not playing games anymore. He was not sending messages. He was here for his property. Cashin fired. The muzzle flash illuminated the room in strobe light horror. One intruder fell. 2 more landed. Go to the safe room. Cashin roared, pushing Elara toward the door. Go. Elara stumbled into the hallway. She looked back. Cashin was fighting 2 men. He was a blur of lethal efficiency, but there were too many. A knife flashed. Cashin grunted, stumbling back. Blood, bright and arterial, sprayed onto the white floor. Cashin, she screamed. The sound tore through her throat. Raw. Gravelly. Rusty. But it was a sound. Her voice. She had spoken. Cashin looked up, shock registering on his bloodied face even as he blocked a blow. Elara. A hand grabbed Elara's hair from behind. A cloth, smelling of chloroform, clamped over her mouth. The world tilted. The last thing she saw was Cashin bleeding, fighting like a demon, screaming her name as the darkness swallowed her whole. The world smelled of old iron and stale water. Elara woke to the sensation of zip ties biting into her wrists, cutting off circulation until her hands felt like dead weights. She was not in the area anymore. The air was thick, humid, and carried the subterranean chill of a basement that had never seen the sun. She opened her eyes. A single bulb swung overhead, casting nauseating shadows against concrete walls stained with dampness. Welcome back, Tichka. The voice was a physical violation. Elara flinched, her body betraying her before her mind could catch up. Dmitri Volkov sat on a folding chair 3 feet away, cleaning a serrated hunting knife with a rag. He looked older than she remembered. His face was gaunt, the skin gray and pockmarked, but his eyes were the same, pale, watery blue, devoid of anything human. You look well, Dmitri said, inspecting the blade. Expensive. He fed you well. Dressed you in silk. He stood up, the chair scraping against the concrete. But he did not fix you. You still broken. Still silent. Elara pressed her back against the cold pillar she was tied to. Her throat burned, a raw, searing pain from the scream she had torn from her vocal cords at the Airy. Cashin. The image of him falling, blood spraying across the white floor, flashed behind her eyes. He's dead, by the way, Dmitri said casually, as if commenting on the weather. He stepped closer, the knife glinting. My men put 3 bullets in him. 1 in the gut. 2 in the chest. No one survives that. Grief hit her like a sledgehammer. It was not the sharp, panic-induced fear she was used to. It was a hollow, crushing weight. The monster who had bought her, the men who had watched her from the shadows, the protector who had promised to burn the world, gone. Do not cry, Dmitri tutored, reaching out to wipe a tear from her cheek with a rough thumb. You know I hate it when you cry. It makes you ugly. He leaned in, his breath smelling of vodka and onions. We going home, Elara. Back to St. Petersburg. Back to the cage where you belong. But first, I need to remind you who owns you. He raised the knife, tracing the tip down the front of her torn silk blouse. He was going to carve a new message. Elara closed her eyes. She thought of the Airy. She thought of the rain against the glass. She thought of Cashin's hands, violent hands that had touched her with reverent gentleness. Stop acting like a victim. The memory of Cashin's voice was so clear it vibrated in her skull. You are not a swan. You are a phoenix. Elara opened her eyes. She looked straight into Dmitri's pale gaze. She summoned every ounce of air in her bruised lungs, pushing past the scar tissue, past the fear, past the 3 years of silence. Her voice was a wreckage. A rasp of sandpaper on stone. But it was loud. Dmitri froze. The knife hovered over her sternum. Shock slackened his jaw. What? He. Elara swallowed, tasting copper. He is not dead. Dmitri stared at her, uncomprehending. The porcelain doll had spoken. The impossibility of it shattered his rhythm. You speak, he whispered, fury replacing the shock. For him. You speak for him. He raised his hand to strike her. Boom. The world turned white. The heavy steel door at the far end of the basement did not just open, it disintegrated. A shaped charge blew it off its hinges, sending twisted metal spinning across the room. Dmitri was thrown backward by the concussion wave, landing hard on the concrete. Elara squeezed her eyes shut as dust and debris rained down. Gunfire erupted. Controlled. Rhythmic. Pop pop. Pop pop. 3 of Dmitri's guards fell before they could even raise their weapons. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. He moved with a limp, favoring his left side, but his pace was relentless. He wore a tactical vest over a ruined, blood-soaked cashmere sweater. In his right hand, he held an assault rifle. In his left, a combat axe. Cashin Ri. He was not a businessman tonight. He was not a patron of the arts. He was the wolf. His face was a map of violence. A cut above his eyebrow poured blood into his eye, which he did not bother to wipe away. He scanned the room, ignoring the dead men, ignoring the chaos, seeking only one thing. His eyes locked on Elara. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it looked like pain. Cashin, she screamed. It was easier this time. The dam had broken. I'm here, he roared back, his voice guttural. Dmitri scrambled to his feet, grabbing Elara by the hair and hauling her up. He pressed the knife to her throat, using her as a shield. Stop. Dmitri shrieked, his voice cracking. I'll kill her. I swear to God, I'll open her throat. Cashin stopped 10 feet away. He dropped the rifle. It clattered to the floor. He gripped the axe tighter, his knuckles white. Let her go, Dmitri, Cashin said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. And I will let you die quickly. You do not look like you re in a position to negotiate, Dmitri sneered, tightening his grip. Elara felt the blade bite into her skin. A warm trickle of blood ran down her neck. You re bleeding out, re. Cashin did not look at his wounds. He looked at Elara. Are you hurt? No, she croaked. Cashin, go. I am not leaving without you. He took a step forward. Stay back. Dmitri pressed the knife harder. Drop the axe. Cashin hesitated. He looked at the weapon, then at Elara's terrified eyes. Slowly, he lowered the axe. Good, Dmitri panted, sweating. Now, kick it over here. Cashin did not move. He stared at Elara. He was not looking at her eyes anymore, he was looking at her hands. Her bound hands. He gave a microscopic nod. Trust me. Elara understood. She was the phoenix. As Cashin bent his knee as if to place the axe on the floor, Elara threw her weight backward. She did not pull away from the knife, she slammed her head back into Dmitri's face. The cartilage of his nose crunched. Dmitri howled, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. The knife skittered across her collarbone, slicing shallowly but missing the artery. Elara dropped her weight, stomping hard on his instep with her heel, and twisted out of his grip. Now, she screamed. Cashin did not need the command. He lunged. He did not use the axe. He tackled Dmitri, slamming him into the concrete wall. The impact knocked the wind out of the Russian. Cashin was on him instantly, a blur of rage and retribution. They fell to the floor, a tangle of limbs. Dmitri was fighting for his life, punching at Cashin's bullet wounds. Cashin grunted in agony but did not let go. He pinned Dmitri's arms with his knees. Cashin's hands found Dmitri's throat. You touched her, Cashin snarled, spit flying. You touched my wife. Wife. The word floated in Elara's mind, surreal and absolute. Cashin squeezed. Dmitri thrashed, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging. Cashin did not look away. He watched the light fade from his enemy's eyes with cold, scientific detachment. When Dmitri finally went still, Cashin did not let go immediately. He held the corpse for another 10 seconds, ensuring the threat was extinguished. Then, he collapsed. Cashin rolled off the body, landing on his back, gasping for air. His hand pressed against his abdomen, where blood was pulsing dark and fast between his fingers. Cashin. Elara scrambled over to him, her hands still tied. Cashin, no, no, no. He looked up at her, his eyes hazy. He smiled, a weak, bloody, beautiful smile. You spoke. Shut up, she sobbed. You have to get up. Please. Pocket, he wheezed. Knife. Elara fumbled in his tactical vest, finding a small switchblade. She maneuvered it with her clumsy, bound hands, sawing at the zip ties. The plastic snapped. Free. She immediately pressed her hands over his wound, trying to staunch the flow. Stay with me. You promised to burn the world, remember? You have not finished yet. Cashin reached up, his hand trembling, and cupped her cheek, smearing blood on her skin. I burned it for you. Did you see? I saw, she wept, kissing his palm. I saw. Good. His eyes fluttered shut. Elara. What? Say my name again. Cashin, she whispered, leaning her forehead against his. Cashin. Cashin. Music to my ears, he murmured. And then he went limp. 6 months later the Grand Theater had been resurrected. It was not a dusty relic anymore. The velvet seats had been reupholstered in deep crimson. The gold leaf on the proscenium arch had been restored. The chandelier, once dim and missing crystals, blazed like a captured sun. Tonight was the opening gala. The elite of Seoul filled the seats, politicians, chaebol heirs, celebrities. They were there to see the miracle. Elara's song stood in the wings. She wore a costume of black feathers and diamonds, a striking contrast to the white swan she had once been. She was not afraid. The stage was no longer a place of judgment, it was her kingdom. Nervous. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Elara leaned back into the solid warmth of his chest. Cashin looked better than he ever had. The limp was gone, healed by expensive Swiss doctors and stubbornness. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, concealing the jagged scars that crisscrossed his torso, scars she traced every night with her fingertips, reading them like Braille. I do not get nervous anymore, Elara said. Her voice was clear, melodic, slightly husky, a sound Cashin was obsessed with. I just get impatient. He kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear. They are waiting for you, Mrs. Let them wait. She turned in his arms, fixing his bow tie. Where is the security detail? Perimeter is secure. Snipers on the roof. And, he patted the inside of his jacket, I am here. Elara smiled. It was not a porcelain smile. It was a sharp, dangerous thing. You enjoying this? Being a patron of the arts. Being a terrifying, overprotective husband. Guilty. He brushed his thumb over her lips. Go out there. Remind them why they should worship you. I'll be in the royal box. Watching. Only watching. Cashin's eyes darkened, the familiar hunger flaring. For now. Later, you belong to me. I belong to myself, Cashin, she countered softly, her hand resting on his chest. But I choose you. The most dangerous choice you ever made, he whispered. The best one. The orchestra began the overture. A haunting, minor key melody that Elara had commissioned herself. The Phoenix. She stepped away from him, moving toward the light. Break a leg, Cashin called out. Elara looked back over her shoulder, her silhouette framed by the blinding stage lights. I'd rather break hearts. She ran onto the stage. As she leaped into the first grand jeté, defying gravity, defying her past, defying silence, Elara caught a glimpse of the royal box. Cashin was there. Standing in the shadows. He was not looking at the audience. He was not looking at the theater he owned. He was looking at her. And for the first time in her life, Elara's song did not feel like a doll in a collection. She felt like the fire that had burned the collection down. She danced. And the world watched in silence, breathless, while the wolf kept guard over his queen.